Another name has been added to the long list of former football players known to have suffered from a serious degenerative brain disease. Yesterday, we learned the Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion, Demaryius Thomas, had stage 2 chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE, when he died in December. He was just 33 and died following a seizure, one of many he'd suffered since a car crash in 2019. On hearing the diagnosis, former Cowboys receiver Dez Bryant, a friend of Thomas's, took to Instagram and wrote in part, "It's a lot of us living with CTE, and the NFL know it. Most importantly, the athletes who have those symptoms are scared to speak." A damning statement for the NFL. But while a lot of the talk of CTE does surround football, with more than 300 former players diagnosed so far, it's not just football. Last week, we learned of the first public CTE diagnosis of a Major League Soccer player, Scott Vermillion, who died of a drug overdose on Christmas Day 2020 at the age of 44. I'm joined by Chris Nowinski. Chris is co-founder and CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which works to support those affected by CTE and advocate for safer sports. He's also co-founder of the Boston University CTE Center, which conducts research into the condition. He's a former All-Ivy League football player, then a pro wrestler who retired after suffering from post-concussion syndrome. Also joined by Taylor Twellman, former Major League Soccer MVP with the New England Revolution, who also retired after being diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome and has since started the nonprofit Think Taylor, aimed at increasing concussion awareness in youth sports. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both.
You as well.
Taylor, starting with you, the finding in Scott Vermillion's case, the formal diagnosis of CTE, I assume this is something you long suspected even before the formal finding, no?
Yes, absolutely. First off, for complete transparency, I know Scott. I played against Scott in college. I knew of him with the youth national teams, always a hard-nosed defender. And even though the reports are the one diagnosed concussion, that was not the kind of player that Scott was. He was a very hard-nosed defender. So to be shocked by this, in the sense that soccer now has CTE, you'd be naive to think that it wasn't there. I feel for the Vermillion family because I think it was a tragic experience with the kids, with the parents, with the significant others. And so hopefully this brings a little closure to them as they try to, move on with their lives and whatnot. But this is no surprise whatsoever to any of us who play sports at a high level.
When you say no surprise, I mean, as an outsider, wasn't there a study out of Europe, Taylor, a couple of years ago saying that professional soccer players there were 3 or 4 or 5 times more likely to suffer from neurodegenerative diseases than the average person? So headers are dangerous to your health is nothing new, right?
No, it's not. Although people, the power brokers want to tell you, Jim, that, well, it's the collisions, it's the act of heading. And yet when you think about it, a ball moving at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, hitting someone's head, those subconcussive hits, you're naive to think that those aren't going to have an impact. And now you're starting to get more people in Europe asking the questions. Chris and I will both tell you, the more Europe starts asking the questions where the richest clubs in the world are, the more evolution that there's going to be had, because FIFA, UEFA, and the power brokers in this sport are going to have to listen at some point.
You know, Chris, when I read what Scott experienced, things like impulse control problems, depression, substance abuse, it sounded like deja vu all over again. Those are not atypical for people who ultimately we find did suffer from CTE, correct?
That is the most common way people with CTE have died and been diagnosed, is through suicide, and so many of them have suffered with substance abuse. Even, I've lost a couple close friends in the last year due to that.
Chris, staying with you, how much of an impact, I mean, Taylor just mentioned a minute ago, Europe are the big dogs when it comes to soccer, but it seems to me, again, as an outsider, as just a consumer of what you do in the sports you both participated in, that when you have the first in this country in a professional sport, that has to have a pretty significant impact. Does it not, or am I being naive, Chris?
No, it's having a significant impact. In fact, Taylor and I have been talking to some real U.S. soccer legends about getting involved and helping change the game to make it safer. People are starting to rally around this to realize it's a stake in the ground from which we can move forward and change the way we need to change. I mean, I think Taylor said it well. We need to speak the truth here. It is the ball hitting your head over and over again is going to cause CTE in some people. And we have to accept that. And now we have to start changing, and we have to support those who are hitting the head too much. Because what's also happened is a lot of players started coming forward very quietly saying, I also have all those symptoms Scott has. I played against Scott. I need help. And so I hope we respond to this the right way and really change soccer and really start supporting soccer players.
Well, you know, Taylor, let's stay on the professional level for a minute and then work our way down to where you guys spend a lot of your time with kids. Here's a statement from the chief medical officer of Major League Soccer, Margot Patukian. I hope I'm not butchering her name. It was the AP on June 28th. MLS is a leader in the sport, advocating for and piloting the FIFA Concussion Substitute Program, implementing a medical spotter program to identify potential head injuries, removing from play any player with a suspected head injury for assessment and as necessary treatment. There's always more progress to be made, and MLS is staunchly committed to this important work. Are they doing enough, or is that more rhetoric than reality?
That's more rhetoric than reality. However, I will tip my cap to Major League Soccer, because the moment this news happened, I think something that they wanted to launch in 2023, 2024, it may come very soon here. The concussion substitution rule is so easy to implement at the professional level. And the reason why I am such an advocate for this, Jim and Chris, is not about the pros. It's when the professional game recognizes that there is a concussion issue, then everything trickles down, and then it's easier to change the youth. It's easier to teach the youth. It's easier to create change for the betterment of the game, but it has to start at the top. That statement is more rhetoric than it is reality. However, I think reality is going to overstep that rhetoric very soon here, because I think Don Garber and some of the owners are like, wait, we can't sit on our hands the way some of the owners did with the NFL.
Taylor, can you in 15 seconds, and what is the concussion substitute protocol? What does that mean in English?
In English, it means you have to properly assess the injured player if there's a suspected concussion. And every neurologist will tell me and Chris it's at the minimum 7 minutes and normally 10 minutes. Take the player off, put another player on. If that player is deemed to be concussed, keep him off. The substitute doesn't count. No problem. The problem, Jim, in soccer is there isn't unlimited substitutions. And so now managers are making medical decisions that shouldn't be making those decisions. If a concussion happens, get them off. The sub doesn't count. We will create huge amount of change if that's implemented, because every youth will then say, you know what? We got to follow the rules.
Let's talk about those youth, Chris, for a second. I read something about U.S. Soccer, which I guess is the governing body for kids soccer around the country, is that under 10, please stop me when I'm wrong, no headers at all, 10 or 11 to 13 or something, limited number. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
Under 11, no headers, and then it's limited until 14.
And is that enough? Is that where we should be with kids playing soccer, or not enough?
I would say not enough. You know, Taylor and I worked together on the Safer Soccer program 7 years ago now to implement no heading. We think it should be no heading until 14. You know, give the brain a little more time to develop. And really, we just have to keep focusing on heading. I think the other thing but building on what Taylor said, that the statement by MLS, notice how it only talked about concussions. It didn't address the headers. And the headers are the issue that's causing CTE. It's not just a random concussion here or there. And we have to be honest about that with people. We need to stop hitting children in the head. That's the number one thing we need to tell parents and coaches.
You know, parents and coaches, Taylor, but there's a kid involved too. And I'm assuming that even if you're able to do the education, even if it requires a little force for the adults in charge, do the kids get it? Or do the kids say, I want to do this. I love doing this. I watch you do it. I want to do it too.
Well, first off, I would say to every kid and every parent out there and every coach, how many headers have you seen Messi have? He's arguably the greatest player ever, and he's never headed the ball in his life. So our game it's not like tackle football, gridiron football, rugby, where it's inherent that you've got to be involved. Heading can evolve at later stages. Throughout my years of being retired and traveling with ESPN, I make it a point to go watch youth. The youth don't want to head a ball. They don't want to head a ball. The ball's moving at high speeds. They don't want to head a ball until knuckleheads like myself coaches and parents around the world say, let's head a ball and throw a ball at their heads. Honestly, this is why I started Think Taylor, Jim. If I empower the kids and we get the parents and coaches out of the equation, the kids are going to lead to change because they're going to look at the parents and go, I'm not heading the ball and you can't force me to. I'm going to become a better player with the ball at my feet. I'm telling you, the longer that goes that way, the better off the sport's going to be. And then we can talk about 13, 14, 15, 16 on how to address this. But it's actually, no pun intended, it's a no-brainer to do this. And I find it odd that people are fighting it.
I want you to know, Taylor, in the spirit of full disclosure, when I was a kid and tried to play soccer, I wanted to head the ball, but I couldn't. So it's a little bit different kind of thing. Chris, I know you worked with the Thomas family. I mentioned Demaryius Thomas a minute ago. The thing I don't quite understand, Taylor a minute ago used the word closure. When a family decides to work with you and your colleagues, they have to revisit the pain that somebody they love lived through. Not only is suffering, but their ultimate fate. Why do they do it? Why do they decide to work with you guys?
Yeah, we wouldn't be anywhere without these families saying yes to brain donation. I reached out to the Thomas family directly, and they were really wonderful about it. The families want to give back to the game, and actually, Demaryius Thomas' mother, Katina Smith, said, Demaryius said, if anything ever happens to me, make sure I help those who come after me, and that's why she said yes.
Wow.
But also, there is that idea of closure. It puts the suffering and the changes in perspective. So many families watch their loved ones' personality change. They become forgetful, they become angry, they become all these things you don't like. And it helps you realize that wasn't their character. That was the brain disease changing them. And you can still love them for who they were when they were themselves before their brain had started to fall apart.
You know, before we go, just a couple of more things. I mentioned in the introduction, obviously you both retired from your sports because of concussions. Starting with you, how are you now, and do you worry about your future?
I'm doing much better than I was when I was hurt in 2003. I suffered tremendously for 15 years. I think I've gotten a few things under control. I'm not 100%. And the reality is the more tests we do, the more clear it is that I probably have CTE. And so I'm racing to help these doctors at Boston University develop a cure. You know, I tell Ann McKee all the time, like, you gotta make that cure for me someday. I'm gonna need it.
One of many saints over there. How about you, Taylor?
I'm thankful I met Chris Nowinski, not because he's on this Zoom, but just because there's clarity to what I was going through in 2008 and trying to fight through it. I played 10 games with it, shouldn't have done that. I still have my struggles, but for me to be able to persevere through this moment, get to this place, start a foundation, I would have never thought when Chris met me in 2009 that this actually was going to be the whole reason why I got a concussion, yet it is. I'm doing all right. You know, do I do the same things I did 10 years ago, Jim? Absolutely not. I can't. But am I at a level on ESPN where my memory's going and all that stuff? No, I'm doing a lot of things to rehab and try to stay on top of it. But it's more so people can call me and ask for help.
You know, Chris, I only have 30 seconds. One last quick thing. I assume people watching know that the only diagnosis can be made after someone has died. There was a story at the end of last year saying your colleagues at BU may be a breakthrough with MRIs, maybe at a point where it can be diagnosed among the living. Quickly, how close are we?
We've got so many great ideas and brilliant things we've learned from the brains. If everything breaks right, we're 5 years away. Let's just hope our hypotheses work out.
Chris Nowinski, Taylor Twellman, can't thank you enough for everybody watching for the wonderful work you do. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Taylor. Good to see you, buddy.